My name is Clint Mattoni, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. What I love is the warmth of the collection, across the board, with light, time, and color, and with shadow prints. Like, there's a general warmth, which I love that it can make a more maybe avant-garde or edgy haircut accessible. I love the way that stuff was captured. And you were mentioning your guys' decision to use film for these portraits.
Yeah, it was to, how can I say, I wanted everyone, when I'm creating a collection, I really focus on like the process of creating it and how everyone involved in it is approaching it. And I kind of feel like if you do that enough, the end result's kind of academic, like something's good's gonna come out of it. So, and I wanted everyone that was on the team, from the clothes stylist to the makeup artist to the photographer to the people that I work with on the color and the assistants, everyone to be really dialed into what we was doing. And what I liked about shooting on film, apart from the aesthetic of it, and it was more that everyone needed to be on point. There was none of that kind of snap. Oh, let's look at the screen. Okay, we'll move the clothes. Because you couldn't see that. It was frame after frame of a film camera. So everyone needed to be on point. The makeup needed to be on point. My haircut, my shapes, my dressings needed to be on point, because there was nothing to do afterwards, really. We wanted these authentic film portraits. We didn't want to start manipulating them afterwards, and we certainly couldn't see anything on a screen that we could change. So it kind of made I felt it put like the craft back into what we were doing, because there was no like safety net. So everyone their part needed to be right. And there was a real feeling that we were about to not create a digital file that was only ever going to live on a screen, but we were about to take a photograph. And there was something that didn't exist. And in about a second or two, it's going to exist. And it was quite like a cool feeling, because there was like it was a nice atmosphere on set, but there was like more of a serious atmosphere on set. And I liked that. And then I suppose from the aesthetic, I wanted these portraits of people to almost look like paintings almost. And so that they weren't time stamped with technology. Because sometimes if you see a picture and then you use a lot of or even a moderate amount of post editing to it, I always feel then technology moves on, and where's Photoshop going to be in 10 years? And I really feel like you can look back, especially some like awards type pictures that were done 10 years ago, and you to go, well, that was Photoshop 2010, and because you've relied too much on technology, so you've really time-stamped that image because the technology has moved on so much. But then I feel that when you look back at some of the pictures that were done in the 70s and 80s, they look like they could have been done yesterday.
Right.
And I really feel like it's that lack of digital imprint on them that has achieved that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the similarities between that and music are, they're pretty real. I mean, when bands would embrace the sounds of the day, whether it was like synthesized drums in the 80s, I mean, you can instantly identify, what time period this music came from. But if you use, classic instrumentation, you use real instruments, it's hard to tell sometimes when the recording quality is super good and the instruments cannot be dated, really, then it does make things timeless.
Yeah, and that was the aim, I suppose, to attempt to make something that wouldn't feel like antiquated in 5 years or so.
Yeah. It's a really interesting approach to a collection. I think that should be really what everybody tries to do, is make something that's timeless. But I think it's particularly difficult when you're in a trend-driven industry, you want to do stuff that people want to see, that people are currently seeing and like a lot of times. So to interpret that and make it desirable amongst the consumer, but also create something that might push them, to try something a little bit different or new. What do you think the method is there?
Well, I suppose the approach we took was to separate the photography outputs, or the collection outputs. So, as you said, we had light, time, and color, which was more of a conceptual kind of artistic statement. To hopefully intrigue or inspire other hairdressers, but also do that beyond hairdressing and make them an interesting portrait that someone that has an interest in art or fashion or design could appreciate or certainly be interested in. And then we had the lifestyle collections, the shadow prints and sculpture prints, that because we had this, let's call it conceptual collection, that freed us up to make the lifestyle collections really wearable and really something that people want to walk into the salon and wear. Because we didn't have to say everything within one collection. If you do one collection, and you have to be a little bit creative so people notice it, but otherwise you scroll past it because it isn't impactful enough. Right. But it's got to be educational, and it's got to be around product launches, to promote product launches, and then it has to be wearable enough that it's relevant in the salon. That's a lot of things to say within one collection, and I think in trying to say everything, you can say nothing. Right. You can. So we felt separating them made the lifestyle ones very, very relevant and very, very usable in the salon, but also made the conceptual ones be like hopefully just like an artistic statement on their own. And that's. But it's, I suppose, the way that we did that, or the way that we aimed to do that, was to still photograph it on film and photograph it in a stripped back, authentic manner. Like, it still looks like hair, and you can see the strands of hair. It isn't kind of too polished, which and as we said, with the photograph hopefully having the feel of more of a painting, and I suppose like then layering in the different inspirations from. So that someone that's looking at them takes something different from them. If you may take something different than I would take from it, or that someone else would. So that was done in the hope that these images are interesting to people that aren't just hairdressers, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching the promo you guys did for Light, Time, and Color, and I hadn't quite quantified the fact that you had use the clippers up the middle of her head, until I kind of watched you do it, and I was thinking about that in relation to the consumer, and because we would all like to do that stuff on clients, here and there, but there are functional aspects of things like that. There are functional aspects that maybe you could maybe tone it down a little bit, but I think that for the right client, that would actually make doing her hair the way it looks in the photo, that much easier. I think it's a really cool aspect. I think the structure of those shapes, and thinking about that one in particular, I think that is a great bridge, between the photograph and the client. I think that we've all worked with undercuts, and haircuts, that are conveniently placed or placed to be seen, but you can sell somebody on a placement for function as well, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and that it did come out of a little bit of necessity of, I had the half and half the Pacific Ocean green color, and then when I brushed it back into the back, I just felt like it seemed too familiar. Like, I felt like it had that kind of a wedge firefly feel to it, I suppose, which it didn't have enough point of difference, and it was collecting in the middle as I brushed it back. So then I was thinking, okay, well, I want to show the color more. What can I do? And when I was looking at the wall behind me here, when I'm on the run up to a collection, is full of like different references. and I had some of the ska punks on the wall, and I was like, okay, I've thought about that early on in the development of the collection, but I haven't really brought it in. So maybe I can pull a little bit from that, and and you kind of take one bit from here and one bit from here, and then I thought, okay, let's just try it, and I did it, and I took it too short on a mannequin the first time, and I was like, okay, this is like a shaved head, it's going to look really aggressive, so it needs to be like a little bit too long, so it's almost like animal fur. And they used to call it maybe, I don't know if this saying is known in the US, but in the UK they'll call them suede heads.
Yeah.
So it's like a little bit too long, isn't it?
Yep, totally.
And that's why I used that. That's why I left it that bit too long, so it's still sat. It didn't just spike out; it sat, and I think that's it. It's kind of hopefully what the aim was to create something that was quite aggressive, that would only maybe be seen at the second or third time you looked at it, but it still had like a refined element to it, I suppose.
Man, that photo of the back, with her shirt, that vintage shirt it's so good, man. It's such a good photo. Like, yeah, I think I could put that up in my house.
yeah, it's just kind of it is what it is, and I suppose that's why we used that shirt, because we didn't want for anyone to misinterpret that we were trying to say this was on trend or in fashion. It's just is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's the stylist, Steph. She bought that shirt in the 80s in Miami in like a thrift shop, and she's wanting to use it for a while on different shoots, but she's never kind of got the opportunity. And on the first day, I had this look in the back of my mind. It was a 6-day shoot, and we shot that, I think, on the last day or the second to last day. So as soon as I saw her get it out and start to steam it, I was like, okay, the way the green grows up one side of it, gonna like annoy a few people, but that's good enough reason to do it, right? So.
Oh man, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that photo. The model, she was perfect. I mean, it was really, really well done.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good example, actually. The model, the two different types, we did the static back shot of her, and then the front shot where I gave her the product and she styled it herself, and then she's smiling. And I suppose that shows how you can have something quite conceptual, but still is wearable from the front once you start to play with the texture in it.
I've been thinking about that lately, how important it is to get your clients to touch their hair. We're in such a photo-based world now with hair. Every hairdresser is, snapping a picture of their client at the end, trying to sell it. And often that dictates like trying to make things really perfect in front of the camera, but really what draws people in is an imperfection, whether it's that shot from the back that you've got with her cowlick spiking up, from the clippered part, or, like the look in her face after she's done her own hair for that one shot, where there's some humor involved. Like it's really great. And I think clients should get their hands in their hair sometimes before a photograph is taken too. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I think definitely what we said on the shoot was that the back shot belongs to us and the front shot belongs to her, right? That it's almost like she's taken back her hair, right? And it isn't this kind of artistic statement. It's just, this is how I want to wear my hair.
That's great. So doing research for this interview, I'd heard you talk about punk ska, or ska punk, however you want to do it, David Bowie and the Velvet Underground, and I started thinking about, and I know you and I have talked before, but like, who were you in high school?
I was kind of, I suppose I wanted to leave high school and get to work in my dad's salon.
Okay.
So every kind of Saturday I was working at my dad's salon, and I was more that the salon was my like social life. Obviously I had my mates at school, but it was definitely the salon that was more my social circle, because I worked there on a Saturday and there was other Saturday assistants that worked there, and they were the people that like I hung around with on a Saturday evening.
Sure.
So I was kind of in that salon environment from a very young age.
Was like youth culture a big part of your world in that case?
Yeah, I suppose so. Definitely kind of growing up in Greater Manchester at that time, where you had the Verve, and they're from my local town. You had Oasis, you know, the Stone Roses, and then obviously a little bit later, the Arctic Monkeys, and that, you know. So there was that very much like a music,
Sure.
uh, a music scene on that side of things. But you probably know this as well. Working in the salon and doing your training in the salon, you tend to hang around with slightly older people anyway,
Yeah.
because if you're like the 17-year-old assistant, you're hanging around with probably like the 21-year-old stylist, maybe. Yeah. So you're always kind of hanging out with a few people that you're senior anyway.
Which is always convenient to have cool things imparted to you, you know. By,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
I think that, you know, I think that I was always trying to figure out how to, you know, put myself into the hair that I was doing, you know, not be driven by trend so much, but as to, you know, what I wanted to see, the things I was into and stuff like that. And I think, you know, one of the challenges is doing that for your client as well, you know, helping them to channel, you know, what they're into, and redirect that into their image, you know, and try to help them channel that. So for you, I guess, when did it start to become your own language? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I suppose when I first finished my training, I think like a lot of people, I was very reliant on my training, my techniques, because that's where you felt safe. Sure. And that's where, you know, if you get a client that doesn't necessarily like what you've done, you say, well, you know, the haircut was balanced, and it was all, you know, as long as they can't say that one side was longer than the other, it's a good haircut. Yeah. And then after a while, I realized that my techniques were like owning me. I wasn't really owning the techniques, and I was kind of frozen by them. Mm-hmm. And then I started to try and free up my work, and I kind of realized that whether you're designing a building or a car or a haircut or a color or whatever you are, every designer gets a brief, has a client that's going to give them the brief. They have a material to work with, they have a budget and a time limit in which they need to do it in. And then you use your skills and your creativity and your training to solve that design problem. And the second I started to think about my salon work, working with clients as a design problem, then my days just became like so much more joyful, because I wasn't going into the salon going, oh, I've got 10 clients today and I've got a long layer, I've got a graduated bob, I've got a full head of highlights. That all went away. I just had like 8 or 9 design problems to solve. Right. So someone could sit in the chair and I'd be like, just speak to them and really try and assess them in quite a holistic way, as in like, where have you been on holiday? Okay, right. So we don't really need to do that full head of highlights you've booked in for. Maybe we just add 2 darker pieces here. That lighter hair that you've gained from being on holiday is going to look so much lighter. Mm-hmm. So let's just do that. And maybe we just widen your fringe a centimeter to open up your eyes. Mm-hmm. And it was like, and we'll do it dry. So what would have normally been like a 4-hour technique heavy ordeal became like probably like an hour and a half worth of me just chatting to her and doing that. And it really started to like switch around, where people started to like, our clients started to pay for my head, not my hands. Mm. And that's something I've always tried to impart when I've been teaching anyone or mentoring anyone, is that's the way that you can never be replaced by a hairdresser down the road, or a hairdresser in the salon and working in the next chair, because your mind is original to you. And I think that's that's something that I really was a big turning point. And that's when I suppose, to answer your question, when I started to find kind of my own style, where you had the technique, mm-hmm. the foundation, but then I was trying to be quite free with it and not be frozen by it.
Great. Did you organize your time differently when you started to do that?
I would still have like an hour in the salon, mm-hmm. to do a haircut, but it would be a case of like, maybe I would need 2 hours, and then I would just run a little bit late because maybe me thinking along that design route led me to do something much more intricate, or it might have been like 20 minutes of me, I'm just going to just blow dry over your hair and cut your fringe and add some texture, and then you're fine.
Right.
So there was no kind of rhyme or reason to it really, but it became much more enjoyable. So like I might just like cut someone's fringe and then go for a coffee with them or something, but it would be, the day became like much freer, if you know what I mean, rather than me going like, oh, I've got to do a half head of highlights before I leave. And it's like, well, you don't know, she's not even coming through the door yet. Well, how do you know it's a half head of highlights?
Right. I've been keeping that type of thing in mind. I've, since changing spaces, I've started to book hour and a half instead of an hour.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah, just because I can, it's like a new setting, and it gives me time to like relax and talk. And like you said, really approach it. I mean, if you go into an architect and you have a consultation about a house you want to build, like there's no set time limit. Of course we have to have one at some point, but you're going to talk it out and you're going to get to the bottom of what needs to be done. And then the service is certainly much more satisfying, for sure.
Yeah, like you just enjoy your life better, right? Like it's just because you just enjoy your day to day. And I think that comes down to, I had a conversation with a hairdresser, a friend of mine that's got a salon in London, and he was talking about staff retention, and I think that's quite a big issue amongst all of hairdressing, isn't it? How do you keep your staff? Right. And I think it's like it's making sure that they like have a lot of like happiness and joy in the day to day, and a lot of like creative freedom, and they're really enjoying the physical aspect of doing their job. Sure. And I think that's the main way you retain staff as a salon owner, to keep that, that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Have you had a client, or do you still have a client that kind of always pushes you?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, she will always kind of, well, one, she pushes me in the sense because she doesn't give me much information. She just says, oh, what do you think? And she's up for trying many different things. So you don't really have much to go on. And then you'll say, okay, well, did you like that last time? What do you think about this? And do you tend to like it longer? Oh, I don't know. You just do it. You just do it. So then you're a little bit like, okay, so that it's freedom. It's a lot of freedom in one way, but sometimes that blank page is harder than lots of different stipulations, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what was your first experience with her like? What did you end up doing?
First experience on her hair, she'd been somewhere else, and they'd cut her. They cut her a bob, and she has a side parting, or she did then, and it was the classic thing of, oh, this side of the bob's really heavy, and this side of the bob's keeps flicking out, and probably you know what I'm going to say. When you lift the layers up on top, they've cut the layers square, but she has a side parting. So when you drop it down, this side has twice as many layers as this side. So she was kind of a bit lopsided. So we decided to, like, rather than match it up, we decided to go with the flick. So I really laid the other side, so it all went like a little bit softer and flicky. And she kind of, because I'd solved that problem, she just, from then on, she let me do whatever I want to do.
That's great. Yeah, it's good to have those clients who trust you enough to do whatever you want. But I think that takes a longer consultation sometimes when you're like looking for the little bit of direction that's in there,
Yeah, absolutely. It's because then, even if you thinking back like onto a photographic collection, when I think about there's one image from the collection which is called First Light. It's the lady from China who we did the undercut and then the kind of the graphic dressing through the top, and that was kind of, the first reference point was that was from with the hairdresser Christian. There's a picture of him. I don't know what year it is, black and white picture that I saw of him sitting on Cindy Crawford's knee at some like ball or kind of awards dinner. And he had, he always kind of cuts his own hair, doesn't he? And he had this twisted bun, and then he had like a shaved undercut, like almost like a shaved geometric that he'd done this. Looks like he'd done it himself. And I saw that picture and I was like, that's really interesting to have that bun with this thing underneath it. And that was the very like initial like acorn of that idea that eventually went onto that being that picture.
That's great. I hope we get a reference for that. That's I've never seen that photo.
Yeah, I must. It was on the wall behind me, but yeah, I'll send you the photograph after this, and it's like a real unusual thing that he'd done with his hair, but it just stood out to me.
Yeah, that's cool. He's unreal. I got to work on a show with him, and I watched him cut this guy's hair, and it was 5 seconds of exactly what it needed, and it was it was crazy. It was crazy to watch.
No comb?
No comb.
Yeah.
Yeah, just picked it up and did it, and it was so clean and perfect, and I was like, oh, that's a hairdresser right there.
Yeah, he's a real I suppose he's just, if you talk about a hairdresser that's in tune with the hair, and in tune with the shape of someone else's head, and in tune with what's going to feel right for them, it's him, isn't it? He's a master. He's a master at it, isn't he? To just it's almost like he's got like another level of connection to the hair on the head. It's unusual, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's really fantastic. I only got to work with him that once. Hoping I get to interview him at some point.
Oh yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, it would be cool. So you spent, obviously a lot of your time at Sorby, and then you've made the jump over to Davines, which it's been 2 years now with Davines?
No, not just not 18 months or so. Not quite 18 months. 2019 November.
Gotcha. Was there like a discernible change in palette, like in what you had to work with from before? Obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean one was better than the other, but when you have a different setting, different options at your fingertips, what did Davines deliver for you that might have maybe given you the platform to push yourself a little bit?
I suppose like a platform like Davines that has 45,000 salons around the world, I think it is, or 40,000 salons around the world, that is so revered and so respected amongst the wider hair community, but so like loyally protected by people that have Davines, like the people that have stocked Davines in their salons and have been part of Davines for many years. They don't just see it as just like, oh, this is my color company. Right. It's like a lifestyle almost to them. Like they live the brand. Mm-hmm. So with that, they're fiercely loyal or fiercely protective of Davines' reputation, and quite rightly. So with that, when you're going to come in and create collections and create new hair aesthetics for Davines, comes a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. So that pressure forces you to push yourself harder and further than maybe you've ever done before, which is, I think that can only be a good thing for your creative output in the end. You know what I mean? So it's the palette is, I suppose, the change in thinking. I liken it to, I don't speak another language, although I'm learning Italian for obvious reasons. But some friends that I've got that do speak another language, they say when they've lived in another country for long enough, they begin to think in that other language, and then eventually they might even end up to dream in that other language, right, rather than the language that they grew up with. In the 18 months I've been with Davines, before I joined Davines, I always thought of a shape or a cut first, and then I'd figure out what color was going to enhance that. But I've kind of I've had like a shift, and now, because I've been so engrossed in the Davines color palette and the color offering that Davines has, I start to, any idea I get now, I'm doing an event on Sunday, and it's always been, what color will the look be before what shape will it be?
Mhm.
which is like been a change in my thinking. And I can't really pinpoint when it happened, but it's definitely happened. Probably this last collection was the first time it really happened. Like I had the green color before I had the shape,
Right.
which has never happened before.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. Was there, as far as I've seen it in my experience with hair and working in London and in Italy, it always seemed that Italians were much more visual in their approach to haircutting. British, of course, it's Sorbian, Sassoon. It's very precise, uh, like harder shapes, driven that regard. Was that discernible in making that transition to an Italian company? Was there any of that?
Um, I don't know in that way because for probably two reasons. One, we've had the pandemic, so I've not really been spending as much time in Palma at the Davines village that I would have liked in the last 12 months. I would have been there a lot more without the pandemic. So I would have worked with more Italian hairdressers, I suppose. Um, but because of Sobeys, where I come from, because Trevor was at Sassoon's and then he was at Tony and Guy, then he was at John Frieda, and then he was a session stylist. This is the sorbet alloy, let's call it that, is kind of a mixture of all those things. So you learn to you blow dry with a round brush, you razor, you use thinning scissors, you texturize, you do clean geometry. So you get like a mixture of all those things is like the sorbet alley. So it wasn't wouldn't have been just like going from like a straight cutting thing to suddenly an Italian hair aesthetic. There was kind of Sobe had an element of that within the training there anyway.
Amazing. That's cool. Yeah. I'm curious about that. I remember I was doing hair at the Tony and Guy, or it was a TG Academy in Salerno in Italy. And after you do your demo, you go and you teach the people who want to do what you did, it was very hard to pull the round brush out of their hands.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but obviously this was like 10 years ago, so things might have changed since then, but it was always kind of funny.
And I've noticed that even in working with my Davines colleagues in the US,
Yeah.
They tell me that maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a very, very stark difference between the hairdressing on the coasts than there was in the center.
Mm.
But they said that that's kind of changed quite dramatically now, and probably with the advent of social media, because everyone's aware of the same things now, right? Where unless you lived in New York or LA, you weren't exposed to New York or LA, I suppose.
Right. No, that makes total sense. Makes total sense. I think that the last time you and I talked, we had discussed this a little bit, but I think for the sake of this podcast, what was your experience like as far as hairdressing goes? Because oftentimes there's hair cutting, there's hairdressing. Was your base level education always dressing hair too, or did it start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always I started at a hairdresser's in the north of England. Well, I started at my dad's salon first, but then I joined a company called Andrew Collins.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of Andrew. He kind of had he's won British Hairdresser of the Year a couple of times, and he has his famous one pin hairdressing. So he puts hair up with one pin, and he's kind of been very successful in doing it. He does lots of other things as well, but that was kind of his signature. So there was a big dressing aspect in there, and then obviously with Trevor with his avant-garde dressing. I think early on in your career, you go to what you're more interested in, and I was always more interested in the cutting more than the dressing at that side. But then I got to a point where that was restricting where my ideas would go, and I decided like very, very early on in my career that I was always going to try and do things that I'd never seen before. I don't think you can ever say you're doing something that's never been done, because
Sure.
You don't know everything, but you can only do what feels fresh to you. And the ideas that I was developing, there was a point where I didn't have the skills to execute them. So it made me kind of look closely at my weaknesses and really, really work on them.
Right. Did you ever set out to work in editorial exclusively, or was that ever on the table?
Um, no, but I think it's always, I'd always kind of, always the thing that's like got me out of bed in the morning, apart from going and doing my clients, but my kind of personal creative work has always been trying to like break new ground. And that's where I wanted to put all of my time, my energy, my extra money to fund my own shoots. It was always doing these like independent art shoots, rather than doing the session thing and going assisting and going kind of working backstage. That was never really a focus for me. It's not something I've ever really I've ever been so interested in. I always just wanted to kind of just do my own thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's I guess we could talk a little bit about the importance of doing your own thing, or like you said, funding your own photo shoots, sourcing your model and actually doing it for yourself. Like how much has that been a part of your development as a hairdresser?
The most valuable thing I could possibly have done. It was, I think it comes from, people will always tell you there's like a formula, you should enter awards, or you should start assisting and doing, doing editorial and, get assisting on fashion week or whatever. And if that's what you're genuinely excited to do, then 100% you should do that. But you shouldn't do it because that's what someone's told you should do. And it was something that just there was just something about it that didn't necessarily appeal to me. But what did appeal to me was getting in the studio and getting a model off the street and trying a few of these ideas that I'd drawn. And then I got to a point where I wanted to kind of see if I could create a show. So I saved up some money and hired a theatre and shot a collection and put on my own show basically, and invited some press and invited different people from the hair industry. And that was kind of my first step into like, okay, I think I want to make, I don't know if I can make a career out of doing shows and doing photo shoots, but I want to try because that's what I really enjoy doing. And luckily it's worked out. But I think I suppose that's to anyone that's watching this, is you will get people that will tell you that formula, but you don't have to do it. If you've got ideas that you think are going to say something, then just fund it yourself. Because the second someone pays for it, they have a say in what goes on.
Yep, so true.
And you don't, and that's fine, because the shoots I've done with all the companies I've worked with and the shoots I do with Davines now are amazing, and you get great creative freedom. But it's always nice to have some things that is totally yours. But to do that, you have to put your hand into your pocket and pay for them yourselves. And it doesn't have to be thousands of pounds, but whatever you can afford, there's always something to be done. There's always.
Yeah. Do you still make time to do your own, like even in the position you're in?
Yeah, I'm doing one next week.
Are you? What can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's going to be. I've kind of had this idea to have like the clothes styling lead the hair. So we've worked with a brilliant stylist, and I gave her kind of 4 or 5 different color palettes. One is like a really soft, like washed out sage green. One is like a blush pink, but it's got like a brown depth to it. And she's one's more like a brick red. One's very, very dark black. And she's sourced this beautiful like female tailoring and silk shirts and beautiful like oversized suits. And we're going to do just really cool haircuts, like nothing too conceptual, just like little geometrics, long soft lengths with little short fringes. But we're going to color each hair all over one color, but to match the clothes. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to do a story for each, for 6 or 7 looks. But yeah, it's going to be nice. And do one from the front and do a shot from the back. But I can just, you can see this mental picture of, I can see this kind of like soft sage green suit going into this really like soft, naturally dried sage green bob and photograph from the back. I feel like it's gonna that sort of trying. But that's the beauty of those things, right? When if it doesn't work out, no one will ever see it, so it doesn't matter. But they can then that lets you be really free creatively, because there's no consequences. You're not working to a point of like, okay, this better work because these images have to be used for something. Like that's quite like a nice thing, right? That's worth paying for. That freedom is worth paying for yourself, because then it's like, oh great, like I'll just try this out, and if it looks brilliant, then great, and if it looks terrible, then I just never use it.
You generally source your models from the street, or do you get them from agencies?
A mixture. More and more agencies, probably just because of the pandemic as well. Like, you not really want to be approaching people on the street, but also over the years, I've kind of got a good relationship with a lot of the agencies in London now, who'll send, if you've got like a new face to the agency and they want to give them a new look because they're new and they want to get a statement so she can start getting work. A lot of them I'll come and they'll send them to me and I'll give them a haircut, and so that kind of builds your trust up with the agencies. So sometimes, if I've got a project like this, I've got one lady coming next week who she's never done any modeling before, but she's just been signed. So we're going to give her a look, and then hopefully she'll get a few portraits out of that. So it takes a while to build that trust up with the agencies, because a lot of agencies think the hairdressers are going to kind of say they're going to take this off and then they take this much off. And, there's not so much trust.
Hey, real quick, let me check my camera just a second, make sure we're still in good shape. We're still in good shape. Cool. I'm used to that not working out so well. So what about your relationship with your photographer? Do you tend to use just a handful of them, or do you have a go-to?
No, not really. With photographers, I tend to I kind of like to change quite a lot. But the guy I worked with last time, John Gorrigan, he's really, really good. The guy that did the film prints for the 3 Davines collections. He's someone that doesn't. I'm not sure if he's ever done any hair, but he tends to do a lot of high-end editorial fashion brands, because he's just got like a very, very good eye and very cool aesthetic, and I knew he would be able to take portraits that was taking a portrait of the person, not like honing in on the hair too much. Which I think, again, it's amazing. That shows what such an amazing company Davines is, that they were willing to try and they were willing to go down that route, right? You're saying you're not doing digital, you're not really focusing in on the hair and making everything over shiny and over, turning up the color tone on the colors and things. They appreciate that process and that kind of organic way of letting things develop. And John's very good like that, and he's quite strong. You'll work with some photographers and whatever you say goes, which is not a good place to be, where there's a few things that I suggested and he was like, that won't work, or I don't like the sound of that, because he has quite a big reputation himself, so the images need to represent him in a good way, as well as just Davines or myself, which is, I think that's quite a good way to be, because it keeps you from getting too, I don't know, egotistical or carried away with yourself,
Yeah, well, I think the world of hair competitions, all that stuff, photographic competitions and hair and stuff like that, I think you can tell pretty quickly that the images are dictated by what the hairdresser thinks they need out of the photo, rather than what the photographer does best, and then you get some pretty terrible stuff. So I mean, I think it's a great way, is you want to get a strong photographer, somebody who has their own voice, and let them capture what you do their own way, which would be the reason you sought them out, in the first place. I think that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, you're so right, and that's what is being an art director. An art director isn't. It's kind of. I always think back to. I watched an interview with Quentin Tarantino, and he was at an awards dinner with Terry Gilliam, the director, and he this was Tarantino's, like, I don't even think he'd made his first film at this point. I think he might have won a competition to be at this dinner.
Okay.
So we started to ask him, saying, how do you light something to make it look like this? And how do you make sure that your actors are going to deliver your lines in the right way that's going to bring, get off what you've written on the page to life? And how do you make sure that your cinematographer is going to make sure that he can kind of capture the essence of one scene and this scene? And he said, he said something that applies very well to a hair shoot. And Terry Gilliam, your job isn't to create your vision. Your job is to have a vision. And then you have to explain that vision to experts.
Right.
And they go on and create your vision.
Yep.
And that was like a turning point. Tarantino said it was a turning point for him. And he was like, oh, right, I have a vision and I can talk about it all day. Great. And it removed the mysticism around it of like, how do you create a film? And when I saw it, it did for me on a hair collection. I was like, oh yeah, like I just need to look at, if I like the way someone photographs something, well then hire them for the shoot and then explain your vision and then let the expert be the expert. Don't try and like tell the expert what to do, right? And that's the same with a makeup artist or a clothes stylist or whatever. Yep. Your job is to hire the right people and explain your vision, and then don't micromanage people. Let people, because the makeup artist knows far more about makeup than I'll ever know. So why would I try and tell him what to do, right? Yeah. So it was quite a good, the Tarantino thing I felt applied very well to that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think you got to let people do what they do best. Again, similar in music, I think, collaborative efforts make the best music. It's oftentimes when it's all from just one person's head and one person's perspective, I think it gets a little boring. So giving people license to do what they do best, but the direction, I think, is the best way to get your concept across, for sure. It's really good. I was thinking about, since you have created and delivered some highly conceptual work, can you take me through your creative process? I mean, down from like the dawn of an idea through its evolution to becoming something like Light, Time, and Color, or the Eternals. Tell me how you work through that.
So I always think that you shouldn't you shouldn't like try and get ready for something. It should just be like part of your life all the way through. Like I would never sit down and go, okay, it's time to start working on a project today and start from like scratch, because I always think that becomes a little bit forced. So the way that I do it is quite easy. I just always have a file with me and or a notepad, and if I know, I'm just going to get some water so that I can answer this question properly. There we go. Sorry about that. So do you want to ask the question again? Then
yeah. So basically, I get the opportunity to talk to somebody who's had concepts developed. They've come to light completely. I wanted to kind of know your process from the dawn of the concept to its creation. How you work that out, basically.
Okay, yeah. So it's quite. I always feel like you should never get ready for something. I think you should just kind of stay ready all the time. I don't really believe in like sitting down to go, okay, time to work on a project. I think any creative project should be something that's started organically, almost without you knowing. So I always have a file with me, and I'll always have a notepad. And anytime that I always say, like, if something's made you look twice, look a third time. And if it's caught your attention for a reason, even if it seems quite innocuous and you don't understand why, and you don't think it could ever fit. And that could be a funny line in a TV program. Maybe you could use it in a show somewhere down the line. You don't know. Make a note of it.
Yeah.
A color texture, the shape, a shape of someone's haircut that's really bad because they've been caught in the rain on the tube, and you take a little picture of it if you can, or just make a little note of it, and all those things go into a file. Or it might be more literal inspirations, like I've been to a gallery and I saw the green color at the Tate when I went. So all those will go into the file, and then I will, about once a month, I will sit down and almost like make an appointment with myself to sit down and go through the file. And I try to figure out like why certain things have caught my attention. And inevitably, what normally happens is there's normally like a red thread, and normally go, okay, that caught my attention because I saw that, and I thought that was funny, and because things out there are connected, because people are all, the fashion's all connected in a way because it's a reaction to something, and music tends to go in a similar direction. So as you start noticing all these things, you start to notice almost like these patterns emerge where you're like, okay, maybe like that could work with this and this could work with that, and then it all starts to build up. And at some point, and if I do that for enough months consecutively, at some point I'll start to see something developing. Like maybe there's like a color palette that's kind of taking precedent over everything else. Maybe I've started to notice things in tan, the same as the color of this comb I'm holding, or maybe a certain photography style, as in the last one, 8 out of the 10 main photographs that I saw were all on film. That had caught my attention. I don't know why they caught my attention, but they did, and that was one of the main. So I started to think, okay, this project has to be on film, because this is really something that's on probably 4 or 5 different occasions I've noticed a film portrait without realizing it was a film portrait at first. So then that starts to all kind of come into fruition, and then you start to think, okay, this color palette is standing out, and this type of film photography is standing out, and these type of shapes. And then I'll start to take the things from the file and put them on the wall behind me and start to build up this kind of junkyard of ideas. And then if I'm feeling like something is of a certain era, like there's one image called Last Lights from Lighttime and Color, and it was based on a book that I had called Silver Skate 70s, which is about skateboarders in California in the 70s. And that was kind of like a big thing at the time. And I kept looking at in the book all the time, and I kept sketching it. And when I'm in that process of like working on a shoot, I'm kind of like totally like I'm in. Then there'll be like a certain day where I'm like, right, I've got a shoot here somewhere within all of these things that are on the wall. There is a shoot, and then like there's like a switch that flips, and then I don't want to know about anything else. I don't want to know about sport. I don't want to know about who's won in the football at the weekend. I don't even really see my friends at that time, because I kind of like go into that world. And for instance, with this, the Bowie reference from Pacific Ocean Green, or the California reference from the Silver Skate 70s book, I was listening to a lot of 70s music at that time, and I try and like not let anything filter in. Like I would never have listened to any like 90s music or modern music in that time, because I just want my whole brain to be totally being fed. Like I want to feed my brain to help feed the collection. So any films I watched would have been from that era. So I was watching like Serpico and Mean Streets, and that I was like just trying to feed that thing, because you never know what you'll see. You'll see like a jacket in it, that in one of them that you think, oh, that could work on the mold because that's from that era. Or I was watching documentaries on Studio 54 because of the Bowie thing, and it was that. And I'll just go totally into the collection. So by the time of like I'm arriving on set to do it, you should be like, you've got so much of this, you've fed the collection. So I always use that phrase, you've got to feed the collection. So then when you get on set, things start coming out all the time, and you're like, okay, yeah, I saw that thing on that, I'll listen to that album, and on the cover of that album, as in I listened to Dennis Wilson's album Pacific Ocean Blue.
Okay.
Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys, and that's where the title came, Pacific Ocean Green, for the green look.
Brian Wilson.
Brian Wilson. Dennis was his brother, wasn't it? No, Dennis Wilson. Brian was the one that's still alive. Dennis Wilson passed away.
So Pacific Ocean Blue was Dennis?
I've got the record here.
No, I believe you. I just can't remember. I just don't know.
No, you make it read that now. Dennis Wilson, yeah.
Was okay, cool. So I guess I need to listen to Pacific Ocean Blue.
It's a good record. But he passed away, and so when I listened to that, I was like, okay, that the Pacific Ocean Blue is such a cool name for an album. Maybe I can weave it into this collection a little bit. And then when I did the green, I was like, and part of the green reference was an aerial shot of an ocean, and I was like, okay, maybe we can have, but that would only come because I'd fed the collection. Yeah. If I'd been listening to something else at that time, maybe it wouldn't have. So, and then when you go onto set, you have all these things that are, and I'll always have a wall on the set that's full of these type of references. So then you just, and then that's it. That's all you can do really, in the hope that then whatever you produce, whether it's a show or a photograph, or a photographic collection, that hopefully by doing that process and feeding the collection along the way, there'll be these like cultural touch points in all the images that people will see, and different people will see different things in it. And I think that's how I hope to create work that doesn't just appeal to hairdressers, people outside the hairdressing industry. My hope would be that they would find it interesting as well.
Yeah, I think that does well. I like the concept of total immersion. I think I've personally always had, I became a hairdresser, but my focus, I think, in my life was always kind of more music. It was an easy thing for me to figure out how to pull all of the influences in that I wanted to pull for whatever I was trying to create. For hair, I think there's always been a little bit of a gap there where it's like, I'm creative. I know I want to create something different or whatever, but like, what do you need to do for all these things that you like to culminate into a concept or an idea that you can then, photograph or create and then photograph? And I like the way you put it. I like the concept of total immersion, in this light, is really good. And I think, you give yourself the time to bake on it, and to think about it and to ruminate, and then it will become something real.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? I think if I look at anyone that's kind of created good things in their or things that have stood the test of time in their chosen field, they've always kind of like lost their mind to it in a way. Mm-hmm. And for a certain amount of time, like they've really been engrossed in it. It wasn't something that they kind of did a 9-to-5 on. And I think there's a kind of, I don't know, it's just a way I really enjoy doing it, really. Yeah. I suppose when it gets to like close to a collection, it's not even like a choice. It's just like you're in it. So. Sure.
Yeah, that might be the one good part of actually putting it on the schedule, is that at some point all of these things do need to culminate into action,
Yeah. Otherwise, as like you can. Yeah, otherwise you can. I know what you mean. You can definitely like go for months and months and months on end, just like, oh yeah, that's good and that's good and that's good, and you need that little bit of time limit where you're like, right, this actually has to. Even if I'm working on a personal project, I'll try and book the shoot, so that I've like paid for the studio, say, for instance. Right. So I know, like, even if it's 12 weeks away, I know I've got 12 weeks. Yep. Because otherwise it's so easy for it to still be sitting there in 6 months later with the ideas in front of you.
Yeah. That's very important part of it, for sure. You work for a product company now, so let's see, how do I put this? How much do you feel that it's important to put the product in your client's hands, in the model's hands, I've always been kind of almost anti-product, like not necessarily consciously anti-product, but maybe just like very light with
Mhm.
product. But when you are putting, shapes on women, do you focus on teaching them to use the product quite a bit?
Um, yeah, I will do definitely because I just want them to have the best. I never think that hair color or cut should be the best it ever looks in the salon, and then gets progressively worse each day as the cut and color grows out until the person comes back. I've never really liked that idea, so I've always felt like it's when they're like leaving the salon, like you're only like your job's only half done, and you need to have like left them equipped with enough styling knowledge of how to manage the hair at home, enough kind of aftercare of how to maintain the color and at home, so that yeah, they maintain what they've paid for. They get the best quality out of what they've paid for as long a time as possible, really.
Have,
Um,
have you found some go-tos within the Davines line that are your favorites?
oh yeah, I think my two favorites. I'm just looking at the shelf of products I've got here. Day Day is it's like a leave-in spray, but it's just for a hairdresser to use it as someone to use it when you're cutting. It gives like tremendous control to the hair, but it's also really beautiful. If say someone just wanted to reactivate the hair the next day, but they didn't want to shampoo
Mhm.
at home, or maybe they just want to condition the hair, maybe they're getting out of the shower and they want to protect it from tangling. It's just a really beautiful product.
Right.
And then the shimmering mist is a shine spray, and the kind of it's got the shine, but it has a beautiful smell, and it's just really light. And I've not really come across a shine spray before that adds like really good shine without weighing the hair down. It's got like a lightness to the shine to it. So I'd say those two are my favorite styling products.
Nice. Very good. We have some, so I'm gonna play
Oh
with it.
dear, what's yours?
I'm learning the line honestly right now, so I don't know that I've zeroed it down just yet, but because the new spot that I'm at, we have it there, and I
All
think
right.
we're gonna work on getting it into Dallas at Lost Hairdressers there, so I'm excited about it. But yeah, that will probably be the most basic hair question I ask. Curious about that though. What do you hope to do next? Like, what do you hope to communicate to your audience? With the next few collections.
um, I've it's been 18 months, not quite 18 months since I've been with Davines, and it's been an extremely unusual 18 months
Yeah.
for everyone around the world. Um, and I'm kind of, I really enjoy learning more about Davines as a company and as an ethos and as a family. Because there's so many beautiful aspects to it. Visually, from the Davines village in Parma is one of the most like incredibly visual places I've ever been to.
Okay.
But the ethos and the personality of the whole company is pretty special. And I've got an idea for something that I'm going to do in the summer where I want a collection to show all that and really embody the culture that has built this company. And I've kind of, you'll know it yourself. You can when you're working on something and you can see it, it's almost playing like a movie in your mind. Like the collection and the videos are almost like complete in my head already.
Nice.
So it's like I can see so clear how I can hopefully create a collection which represents the kind of the amazing culture of Davines and where it was founded. So that's the next big thing that I'm working on.
Um, I think that it's easy to feel like it's all kind of been done with hair sometimes. how do you stay out of that mindset, or how do you maybe stay ahead of that mindset? Or is it even relevant to you at all?
Yeah, I just don't even think about it.
Yeah.
I think like I feel like there's it's like I listened to who said it now? I was listening to some podcast, I think, and someone said, well, unless you like wrote the dictionary, every other book that's come has just been a remix of the dictionary.
Fair.
It's like, well, that's so whether that's Crime and Punishment, whether that's Don Quixote, whether that's To Kill a Mockingbird, it's just a remix of the dictionary, you know. So and I think there's a certain element of, yeah, there'll be new color techniques that come out that move things forward, but the you know, you probably be able to go back and maybe, I think probably the biggest part of progress that we'll find, and I think the best way to find progress within hairdressing is to look beyond hairdressing to inform your work. I think whether that's looking at the way that the other industries dye fabric and color fabric, or whether that's the way that other industries cut shapes and manipulate shapes.
Right.
You know, once we start to look outside of the industry, and I think, but within the industry and using techniques that we all know and know how to do at the moment, it's about how you do it, right? I think that's it. You know, I can look at a Guido Palau image and it looks new,
Right.
even though he might be using the classic technique, but it's just the way he's done it, the way he's put it on the model, the way he's used color in the image, the way he's photographed it. It just feels fresh and it feels right for the time it was in. And I think that there's always an element of, yeah, you can do something that hasn't yeah. And I think I said it earlier on in this, you should always do things that you haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what I try to do with, not, you can never do it with everything, but certainly with a couple of them, like First Light, or which is the lady from China with the undercut and the dressing and the fringe, or the Pacific Ocean Green. Yeah, you can take elements that you've seen before, but you've got to put them together in a way that you've never seen before. And as I said, that's not to say they've never been done before, because you can't ever, no one could ever say that, could they? You know, but you always just want to feel like you're breaking new ground for yourself personally. And if you're doing that, then chances are you're at least saying something new.
Sure. Do you have any other creative outlets that might feed back into hair?
No, not really. I like editing videos.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool.
But they always tend to be hair videos, so I suppose it's kind of. But yeah, I like doing that. I like kind of timing videos to music and making the video change at the right point with the music. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, there's kind of like a collaging element to that too. I mean, I think it's
yeah.
You know, cutting and pasting things together, I think it is pretty fun. It's definitely a groove to get into. Yeah.
And then I suppose the only other thing is, I will go and do boxing once or twice a week, and that, how can I say it? Like, it lets you know like where you are on the pecking order. Yeah. And I think that's a good lesson to bring back into your work, as in, you, like within hairdressing, there's no consequences. You can kid yourself by how good you are or how bad you are.
Yeah.
So doing that, there's no misunderstanding about how terrible you are at it.
Yeah, totally.
Because you're going to find out very quickly.
Yeah.
And you can't pretend. So, and I think that's a good leveler for you. And it's certainly been definitely good. I've brought that lesson into my work where I'm like, okay, don't kid yourself by how good maybe you think you are or how bad do you think you are. So for instance, the first week of January, I came in here and was just like, okay, on my own, we're in lockdown, I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna cut all my classics on a mannequin. I'm going to do a long layer, a mid layer, I think just to sharpen up my skills. And there was a few times I took a section and I was like, oh, well, hang on a minute. And then I realized, oh, I haven't probably cut a pure firefly for 2 years, like a pure one. So how can you expect to just be able to do it second nature if you haven't been doing it? So it kind of, that's so yeah, the boxing thing was probably the only other thing that I do outside of it that I've been able to go like, oh, actually that's kind of kept me in check as far as my work.
Makes sense. It makes sense. Nothing like the reality check of getting punched.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're like, oh, right, okay, yeah. And you think you might have one good day and you think, oh, I was quite good at that today. And then the next time you're like, oh, he was just letting me think I was good today.
Yeah, I had about 3 years doing Muay Thai.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it was really fun, but certainly like once I started sparring, there was a lot of reality checks going on.
Yeah, it's quite humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, you can only be so good punching a bag that doesn't hit back, you know. It's kind of
fun. Well, yeah, exactly, precisely. It's good for fitness, but it's it's good for an ego check every now and again, isn't it?
Totally. So let's tackle the big one. Let's, Lost Hairdressers has always attempted to kind of pull the worlds together, the world of fashion editorial and the world of salon, and kind of bridge that gap where it's not so separate. I think you're doing it well. I mean, I think you did it really well pre Davines, and I think that with Davines it's really soared. So yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what question to ask exactly, but what do you think is key here to try to bring these two worlds together?
I think it comes to, there has to be a realness in everything that you do, whether you're doing something for the salon that's directly to that you want a client to wear, or whether you're doing something as more of like an artistic statement that you want people, hairdressers and non-hairdressers, to be able to appreciate. Anyone that has an interest in art or design. I think there still needs to be like a realness and a connectability to it. And I think that comes from not over editing. I think certainly in this case, the film aspect helps, but I don't think film is essential to achieve that. I think there's some amazing digital natural images as well. So I think there's, and the biggest thing I think is you need to have those like cultural layers in the image. It needs to go beyond the aesthetic. It needs to go beyond, oh, that's a pretty image or that's a pretty color. You need to have things that people that aren't necessarily hairdressers, that don't necessarily understand that haircut technique or that hair color technique that you may have used, but people that just have an interest in design and art and music and film and culture can still look at an image and go, oh, that reminds me of that. That looks a bit David Bowie, or that reminds me of a skateboarder in the 70s, or and then it becomes like, hopefully, like a cultural conversation around the collection and the images, in particular the Last Light from the Silver Skate 70s coffee table book that I've got. That was like a real youth culture. I mean, you're from California, right?
Texas, but I've been
Texas, but you live in California. But that was like a real youth culture at that time. So then when you're taking reference from that, you're taking reference from something that's not been dreamed up by or dreamt up by a hairdresser, but it's reference from something that actually was a real culture and a real youth culture that existed. So I find that's the best way I've found of bridging that gap, to create work that hopefully is interesting to hairdressers, but not exclusive to hairdressers.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's great. What would you say to someone who's got that one client who like could be a model? You have an opportunity there. How do you capitalize on that opportunity to create something that might not just be this salon picture of, the back of somebody's head and some beach waves, Well,
I'd say the first thing with clients in the salon, clients want to go, you're attracted to, I think the first thing with clients is, or for the hairdresser, you attract what you give off. And I
Yeah.
think clients are going to gravitate to hairdressers that represent the type of hair they want to have. So if you want to do more conceptual work, then you would put more conceptual work out there because people are going to be drawn to it, right? But I think it comes back to what we discussed earlier of people should be paying for your mind. And as a client watching this, if you're a client visiting a salon, you want to visit a hairdresser that it's their mind that is the most valuable thing, because they're giving you ideas on what to do with your color. They're giving you ideas to what to do with your cut. They're giving you ideas that are totally bespoke to you because they've listened to you and they've assessed what you need in a holistic way. Not just a hairdresser that's going to come in and, okay, do you want a bob? Do you want a long layer? Do you want a full head of highlights? That's not that. So I'd say it becomes to bridge that gap. As a hairdresser, you have to be thinking more along a design-led route rather than a hairdresser education technique-led route, I think.
Right. Yeah, I like the idea of a concept. I like the idea of picking out those clients that you could maybe photograph well, and after you cut their hair and style it out, and maybe going for a walk, and actually letting them relax and creating a story, not just a hair photo, but a story. And perhaps that'd be a good way of getting people into, photographing, and more kind of sharing a complete vision rather than just, a salon picture of a haircut, and perhaps that could turn into some editorial work, as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually, that put them in, we'll go with your client into like a real setting, not it's a white background with a ring light, and and I think it's great that people can do that now, and they have a kind of a way to share their work and share their. But I always think there's enough clients to go around everywhere, isn't it? But I for a client to, as in. For a client, if I was going to find someone to cut my hair or color my hair, I'd want to go to a hairdresser that did all of this other stuff as well. That was always into the best hairdressers I've ever worked with, as in client hairdressers, have always done a lot of creative projects themselves. They've always really pushed themselves and been interested in the more conceptual, artistic side of hairdressing. Because I think it makes you a better salon hairdresser. Right. And I think that's the beauty of going to see shows, and going watching her shows and visiting seminars and doing education. And even down to, I watched the documentary about a Michelin star chef, but I was a better hairdresser the next day because of it. Because even though that was nothing about her, because it feeds your kind of your creativity and your passion for what you want to do, right? And you can get excited about the detail they put into their food, and you think, I'm going to put that into my work. So I think that's why a conceptual collection like Light, Time and Color is quite nice for I think that's why a conceptual collection like Light, Time and Color is quite important for a company like Davines to do, because it shows that that Davines hairdressers are very passionate, creative hairdressers, and that only is going to benefit the client that's going into the salon, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And I hope more companies follow suit. I mean, it's really refreshing and well executed. It's really good.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that, and that's why we wanted to reach out to you guys, because you, as I said, I think you said earlier, you attract what you give out, right? And I think it was clear from very early on with Lost Hairdressers, your guys' aesthetic and your taste and your attention to detail and your ability to like look at the nuance of what people are doing was pretty amazing. So that's felt like it had a natural connection.
Oh, for sure. We've been following you for a long time, and you've always been, supportive, and it's, always been a huge fan of your work and really idealized your career, for myself as a hairdresser. And then now that Lost Hairdressers actually has a brick and mortar, and we're going to have our own social media for that,
Hmm.
which will be salon. And so seeing companies like, or seeing collections like what you and Davines have created, it's a testament that it can be done, you know, and we'll look to that, you know, for inspiration as we're trying to develop as well. So it's really great, man. Really inspiring.
Thanks, Clint. Appreciate your time.